Prior to my arrival in Armenia, I didn't have much time to generate any expectations. I was a full-time student finishing my 3rd year in university. I was working as a freelance videographer and editor and barely being able to sleep at all. For 2 years before I started my Birthright experience, I had been suffering with insomnia as the main symptom of my PTSD, and I was rarely able to sleep for longer than 4-hour chunks at a time. Little did I know that but a year later, I would be sleeping almost full nights consistently, I would no longer be drained by unexpected panic attacks, and I would overall feel better equipped to deal with all of my mental health issues. And I attribute this change to 3 main factors. The first of which being the emotional support that I gained from my host families. If you're a high-functioning individual with a mental health issue, you know that reaching out for help really isn't in your nature, even when you know that you need it dearly. The reason that living with host families was such a huge advantage to me was because without asking for it, and yes, oftentimes when it wasn't even needed, I was receiving an overwhelming amount of emotional care. If my host mother in Vanadzor sensed in the slightest that something was wrong with me, she would fuss over me and provide every remedy fathomable until she was convinced that I was happy. When I got tonsillitis and had to stay home for just a few days, I swear it made my host mother so stressed that I willed myself to become better much faster just so that I didn't have to see her suffer anymore. Now, a lot of this may sound like maybe an overwhelming or overbearing amount of care, but for my condition, this was exactly what I needed because I was getting what I needed without asking for it. And obviously, this really improved my quality of sleep. The second factor that I believe really contributed to my better sleep was the learning of a new language. As most of you in this room probably know, learning Armenian is no small undertaking, and it takes up a lot of your brain power. Especially in my first few months of being in Birthright in this very international sphere, I was speaking English, Russian, French, and Armenian on an almost daily basis, and it was draining me to the point of very blissful sleep. The other factor that I noticed from being in a country where you don't understand the main language of discourse is that you don't experience as great of an inflow of extra unneeded information. What I mean by this is that your brain has more room to breathe and think when you don't understand every word being said at the next table in a cafe or in public transport. This was especially highlighted to me when I returned home for my 2-week vacation and I was sitting in the New York subway realizing that I could understand every word being said around me, and I found myself thinking about those conversations as the day went on that had nothing to do with me. Upon my very sweet return to Armenia, but 2 weeks later, I found myself with much more room in my brain to process all of the new experiences that I was going through. Now, the third, and what I believe to be the most significant reason that I've improved my sleep so drastically is the different style of friendships here in Armenia. Knowing Russian has been a huge advantage for me in being able to connect and become friends with locals in Armenia. But let me tell you that the learning curve you have to go through to understand the style of friendships here is very steep. For one, your friends are constantly checking in on you. Whether it be a message or a phone call out of the blue, they don't need to have a reason to talk to you. Whereas back home, if I called my friend without something to talk about, it would almost seem like an invasion of privacy. The other factor that I noticed to be much stronger here in Armenia is the sense of loyalty and connection. Armenians are a viciously emotional people, and they have zero qualms about expressing those emotions in what I used to consider rather grandiose statements such as "I will be in pain when you leave," or "Мне будет больно, когда ты уйдешь." But now, this Armenian quality has had a very good effect on me in terms of my own ability to express my emotions in both positive and negative ways. Of course, you guessed it, thus helping me sleep. My experience in Armenia has been an intense one, but I could not be more thankful for this last year, for pushing me into a space of greater exploration, for providing me with a newfound and very valuable identity, and of course, a good night's rest. Thank you.